increasingly likely that Boris Johnson's going to be the next Prime Minister. Would he make a good one?
No, in a word. He was a Foreign Secretary with a risible tenure. He didn't display any basic competence or seriousness of purpose in that job. Brexit has damaged the UK's international reputation in the last few years, but close behind that, Boris Johnson's tenure as Foreign Secretary has damaged that reputation. He seems to have had a political career where he's gone out of his way to be gratuitously offensive to as many people and groups as possible. So I'm afraid I don't think he will be a good Prime Minister, and I find it actually quite hard to get my head round that knowing everything they know about him, the Tories are even contemplating putting him into number 10.
I mean, the Conservatives have done relatively well in Scotland in recent years. What do you think the prospect of a Boris Johnson leader would do?
You only have to look at how uncomfortable Ruth Davidson is whenever Boris Johnson's name is mentioned to know what the Scottish Conservatives think about the prospect of him in number 10. I think he'll be devastating, disastrous for the Conservatives UK-wide, but particularly in Scotland. He's seen in Scotland, I think, as one of the principal politicians who are responsible for the mess that we're in over Brexit. The guy who misled people in the EU referendum campaign, and the guy who now says he's prepared to take the UK out of the EU without a deal. And for most people in Scotland, that's a horrifying prospect.
Ian Blackford caused a lot of controversy when he said that Boris Johnson was racist. Is he?
I agree with Ian Blackford's comments.
So you think that Boris Johnson is racist?
Boris Johnson has made overtly racist comments. Now, I don't know what's in Boris Johnson's head when he says those things. I don't know what he's thinking, what motivates him, what he actually feels about those things. But if anybody, Boris Johnson or anybody else, makes the kind of comments that he has done...
Saying someone has made racist comments is a big thing
the comment he made about Muslim women looking like letterboxes, the things that
so people who criticise the burqa are racist?
Well, you can criticise the burqa. Personally, I think it's up to women to decide what they wear and don't wear, but you can criticise the burqa without being deeply offensive. Calling a Muslim woman a letterbox or looking like a bank robber, some of the things he said about black people, I wouldn't even repeat because I don't think it's appropriate to do so. So the point I'm making, I don't know whether he just does that for effect to grab headlines or if that is what he really thinks. I can't tell. But I do think people who are prepared to make comments like that can't suddenly throw their hands up in horror when people call them out for it and say that they appear to be racist as a result of it.
The prospects of a general election are looking relatively high.
Let's hope so.
If there is a hung parliament, would the SNP be prepared to do a deal with Labour?
I would want the SNP in Westminster to be part of a progressive coalition that could keep the Tories out of office. Now, that's not me giving anybody a blank cheque. It's about saying frankly and candidly to people where the SNP stand in that picture.
So you would potentially go into coalition then with the Labour Party?
I said in previous general elections, I think formal coalitions I would be not particularly keen on. I'm not.
Smaller parties often do badly out of them for Lib Dems.
Well, the SNP is of course the third biggest party in Westminster. I don't think we can be described as a small party even in that context, of course. But I've already said I don't think, I'm not ruling anything out and out. I don't think formal coalitions is what we would seek to do. We've been trying to work with Jeremy Corbyn to get him behind a second EU referendum. Thus far, that hasn't happened. And Jeremy Corbyn, and I say this in all seriousness, if we have a no-deal Brexit or a catastrophic Brexit, all of the damage that is done from that, Jeremy Corbyn, if he doesn't get off the fence in a second EU referendum, will bear almost as much responsibility for that as Theresa May and the Conservatives.
You say that you've been working with Labour.
We've been seeking to build...
What's your sense about whether or not Jeremy Corbyn personally wants to see another referendum?
I don't think he does. And I think Jeremy Corbyn, and this is me, again, it's a bit like Boris Johnson, I don't know what's in Jeremy Corbyn's head, but everything would suggest that Jeremy Corbyn, however he voted in the EU referendum, actually would prefer the UK to leave. The real challenge for Labour now is to decide, because they can't keep straddling this fence or perching firmly on it. They have to decide what side are they on. Are they prepared to see the UK taken out of the EU, potentially with no deal by a Prime Minister like Boris Johnson, or are they going to now say, given everything that's happened in the past 3 years, isn't it time to let people across the UK look at this issue again and make a decision?
Talking of referendums, you've said that you want to have another independence referendum by May 2021. Isn't that leaving it a bit late? I mean, we'll be out the EU by then.
Well, you seem to know more than I. I hope we won't be out the EU by then.
Well, if Boris Johnson's Prime Minister, then the likelihood is that certainly becomes more likely.
I agree with that, but as I've said a couple of times, and the position of Jeremy Corbyn becomes relevant here. I think the prospect of a no-deal Brexit has increased significantly, but also I think the potential to stop that happening if Jeremy Corbyn gets off the fence has also increased.
But why the delay? Why?
Well, we're taking legislation right now through the Scottish Parliament. We have to put that in place. We have, and I make no apology for this, we've been trying to get to a point where people have clarity about the Brexit future, and then they can make an informed choice. So I think, given everything that's happened, the right timescale is later in this Parliament. I've actually said towards the end of next year.
There is a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament. There is chaos at Westminster at the minute. Why don't you just press ahead with it now? Because you worried that you wouldn't win?
No, I'm absolutely confident that we would win a referendum. We've taken the steps to introduce legislation. I have said we will have the option of accelerating that. Of course, I've also said that we will have the discussion with a UK government at an appropriate point about the transfer of power that we recognised in 2014. It was necessary to put any legal grounding of the referendum beyond doubt. There isn't a UK Prime Minister to have that discussion with right now that is worth having the discussion with, but there's no doubt that the case for independence is stronger than it has ever been, and I am more confident. I was confident in 2014. I'm more confident than I've ever been that Scotland will take that opportunity to be an independent European nation playing our part in the world.